welcome back to Future Fast. And once again, we have Chetan Shivaprasad with us. And before I just bring him into the conversation, I hope you had time to look up our first part of the conversation. And those of you who have not done it, I really urge you to go there and listen to it because you will find a lot of things that we're going to talk about now is connected to it, and you'll find it easy to understand this conversation. So please go back, listen to it, and come back and listen to this. And likewise, subscribe to Future Fast, and I hope you will enjoy this as well. Chetan, once again, thank you so much for making time. And what is it that keeps you very occupied today?
Okay, I think there are two things which is kind of taking away a lot of my time. One thing is about pushing my architectural practice to another level, which is a lot more into research and development. And the second thing is my journey with biomimicry, which we started off with in the first part of this interaction, where the whole idea is about bringing in a lot of awareness among people on what biomimicry is and how that can be a part of their journey per se. So these are two things which is kind of occupying me a lot these days.
Well, before I ask you anything further on that, please tell us about your Hampi Research Foundation project.
No, it's called Hampi Center for Design. And
Okay.
as we speak right now, I'm in Hampi.
Oh, wonderful.
Hampi is a lovely place. It's seeped with history. It is one of the first cooled rocks on planet Earth. So you look at the planet, you look at the landscape formations, you'll find rocks which have weathered for the last 3.5 billion years, and you'll find a lot of prehistoric artwork there. You'll find evolution of plants, evolution of flora and fauna at another level. Today it's a very hot and dry climate, but you'll find evolutions of, you go to a place called Sanganakalu, which is around 60 kilometers from here. They have one of the first factories of the Stone Age times, where people used to congregate together to make stone tools. So we have so many things out here in Hampi. So I thought
I just want to add to our audience and listeners outside of India that Hampi is a place, and to be historically correct, Hampi is the name of a place referring to the ruins of what was before that. So prior to that place being called as Hampi, it was called Vijayanagar. Is that correct?
That's right. Vijayanagar.
So Vijayanagar was the name of the place which got into ruins over that's a part of the history of the whole destruction, and post that it is being referred to as Hampi, and that is the term now it is being referred to with. Yes, please.
Hampi is a World Heritage Site. But it is seated in a lot of things. You can go back a few decades or a few centuries before even Vijayanagar Empire, where you go back to folklore, you talk about part of Ramayana happening in this area and things like that. So,
that would be going back to a few millennials. Yeah.
No, I don't know, because as far as we know, humans have not occupied planet for the more than 20,000 years, 25,000 years.
A millennial is 1,000 years, right? So, currently, as people say, Ramayana is supposed to be some 7,000 years ago. That's the typical reference point. So, so you're sitting in a place which has story references to 7,500 years ago, and also 10,000 or 20,000 years ago.
Very true, very true. So
and you said 3 billion as well.
3 billion years ago. Because
if rocks could speak, yeah.
The rocks were formed at that time. So I thought this was a brilliant place for us to really look at my next stage of journey. And we set up a center for design out here, wherein it becomes a hub for design dialogue to happen. It becomes a hub for people coming together and interacting about what's the path for design in the future. And one strong path which I've taken and wherein I'm working on setting up is a center for biomimicry research at Hampi. So we do a lot of immersive activities out here on looking at how Hampi, the natural elements in Hampi can help us look at design from a different perspective. So we're doing immersive activities. We're doing a lot of awareness programs on biomimicry. So one activity of that is this. Another activity which I'm doing with another few graduates from product design is we're designing some very interesting memorabilia based on Hampi. So we are trying to push this idea of design to a much better, much higher level. All right. So that's the intention of Hampi Center for Design.
Right. Well, Chetan, we earlier on a couple of occasions in our earlier conversation, you mentioned about the limitations of palette of material. That's the term you used, right? From a point of architecture. So, what do you see as the challenges going forward, and how do you propose to address them, or how are you propose to navigate them? How are you thinking of navigating them?
No, when I'm saying palette of materials, I was talking about it from the perspective of an architect. But I see this challenge in every other field. Right. I was also sharing with you on how we as human beings use almost all the elements in the periodic table, whereas nature uses only around 15 to 20 elements in the periodic table to produce life. So, and another thing is the kind of materials we use for any production of it. It could be our laptops, could be our glasses, could be our phones, pens, whatever. Every material comes from planet Earth, and everything has a finite time for it. We were talking about a cyclical process. There are two great guys, Michael Bronard and I forgot the other person's name, who coined this term called cradle to cradle, which talked about how a cradle is the birth of an idea, and the present way of producing anything is a cradle to grave concept. Is you throw everything into a landfill at the end of its use. You might recycle it, you might refurbish it and everything, but it finally goes up into a landfill.
See, that is still partially healthy because most times it is not even cradle. It's from the time it is on my table. So I don't care how it came till my table from here on. So,
right. I mean, you look at toy design, the idea of the life of a toy is hardly 15 minutes or 30 minutes.
Actually.
Right. So, but the material used is quite humongous. The packaging and all those things. So, I think what we really need to look at is how can we look at materiality as a whole, and how it would influence the way we redesign things. I don't know if it's truth or false, but when we were talking about creating fuels for vehicles, I think Ford was given a choice of two types of fuels. One was petroleum based, and the other one was some natural oil based, which was produced out of some seeds, and he chose the petroleum based or something like that.
Right.
So I don't know if this is the truth, but the choice.
I've read that too.
Yeah, the choice of what material we can use to produce our future is very critical. And I think a lot of research needs to happen on this. A lot of work needs to happen on the way we'll be designing our future. Is it possible for us to look at algae as a building material in the future? Say, for example, we were looking at the roots of a fungi to bind straw together in a controlled environment, and it becomes a building material. There are companies which are already producing building bricks using the roots of fungi. Right?
Oh, interesting.
We are having companies which are already looking at hemp as a building material. And that's where you start looking at using
Oh,
this to
yes.
multi.
On hemp, we had a very interesting guest coming from Czech Republic.
Oh,
So
wow.
she talks about various use cases and all that. So for those listeners, if you have missed that conversation, please do look up. Her name is Hannah. So
Mhm.
very interesting conversation. And also, Chetan, as a material, I for one do think that hemp was a choice of material few hundred years ago, pretty much in India for a whole lot of things.
True.
Uh, but obviously, for the one best known use case, everything else got suppressed,
True.
right?
But
And
there
uh,
are
in,
there are people fighting for hemp to be used as a regular building material in Bangalore today.
I've heard some names. In fact, I'm also trying to get more people to talk about it. So that's why I went about reaching. I also have few more people coming onto the this Future Fast to talk about it. But one thing, my different readings I found that one of the key reasons where we talk about why British came to India because the Europeans came to India was because they wanted spices from India. But if you actually look at it, till uh, the opium wars in China, opium war one and two, British never really took charge of India. It was East India Company. The reason they never came here is that all East India Company wanted to do out of India was to take opium from here, sell it in China, and their
Yeah.
focus was more about getting those things out. Only that when they landed here, they discovered that India has more gold and more other things, and they started wanting to control it. So the whole history, the narrative that was we were made to believe that they came for spices seems to be a big lie. It was essentially opium,
Okay.
and then they set fire to the whole thing because they wanted to promote the cotton industry essentially to go back because they were familiar with cotton. They were not familiar with them. So that is where I am still trying to do some more digging to find the hemp roots of in India. Go ahead.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's where I'm coming back. I think the next way is really to look at my journey would be if I'm getting into material research, I would definitely go back and ask nature and start looking at how nature produces various things. We talked about um, the um, the what the clusters, lime clusters being used to produce cement.
Correct.
So there are many such research which is happening in terms of how do you look at materials from nature which can be used. Even the seashells, which are basically ceramic, are never burnt to produce that beautiful shine. But for us to create ceramic, we burn it at high temperatures.
A
So
very high temperature. Yeah.
how is it possible for us to learn from seashells and recreate ceramic tiles? Those are things which we should be start working on. If people don't know about the Earth Overshoot Day, the Earth Overshoot Day is the day we finished using the resources of planet Earth for this particular year, and we
Calendar
start
year.
consuming of the from the future. In 2023, we've already finished it on August 2nd, and after August 2nd, we are using it from the future generations. With this rate, I think by 2025 or 26, we'll be reaching the June 30th mark, which means that we'll need two Earths to sustain ourselves as a species. We don't have two planet Earths. So we need to change the way we'll be working with materials in the very, very near future. Very, very near future, we'll be shifting our play of materials.
Ha- who else do you think is thinking and working towards these things in India? Do you think there are more people thinking like this and working towards this? And any organizations that you're creating or you're part of that you can talk about?
Yeah, but even looking at one aspect of biomimicry, which is about additive growth, not subtractive but additive growth, is being used at as 3D printing homes from IIT Mumbai or IIT
IIT Madras.
Madras. Right, they're looking at creating 3D printed homes, and a lot of people are working where you're looking at one homogeneous material building the whole structure.
All right.
And that material to be used for 3D printing could be taken out from debris. You don't have to look at a virgin material to build those homes in the near future. So what was waste could become a building material in the very near future. We have a lot of architects working with debris as a building material.
Is it? Okay.
Using debris as a building material. We've used bottles, we've used keyboard trays as a building material. Things which have considered waste back into an architectural language. We have very young architects like Vinu, Daniel, who's looking at waste as a very important way of expressing built forms, and very artistically done too. Like it is not just used as a material and projected out, but very artistically done to make an expression. So there are a lot of people who are working on these ideas of newer ways of looking at materiality. We are talking about climate sensitive facades, where even the way we're looking at facade design is shifting. Rather than just putting it with glass, how do I make it much more climate sensitive? You look at what is famously known as the pineapple building in Abu Dhabi, which opens and closes its spikes. Control temperatures on the insides. So there are a lot of people working on making building industry much more sustainable or much more regenerative. We are doing a tree walk in a forest, a canopy walk for the forest department, where the bottom of the canopy walk is being designed as landing sites for birds to come and put their nests in. So architecture does not just become a provision for people to use, but also for the local flora and fauna to use.
Yeah, I remember old house, my grandfather's house. There were few pockets were made within the wall, so we had about 5 birds' nests inside.
True.
So I don't see that anymore.
It is. I mean, you should visit more of our homes.
But the new houses, I mean, of course, today I live in a large complex apartment. So all these places are not thought of from what is around us, right? It is built exclusively for people around, people and humans only. So it's a very unfortunate way, right? I mean, we are cutting off ourselves from our surroundings.
No, I mean, the world today is moving towards a very Anthropocene state, right? Where humans are the center of the universe. And unfortunately, that can't be a sustainable way of looking
No, but
at
now that so much of global warming, so much of sustainability talk, and so much of Greta Thunberg hopping out of school and screaming sustainability. And funnily, people recognize that name even in small towns today. The girl who left us, well, I mean, whatever is the lobby group which makes her so famous. But where is that translating in from your perspective? How is all this so much talk? I think this is happening for the last 20 years now.
It is. I'll tell you, I think it has reached a stage where environmental conscious thought processes are a part of the political language. Very strongly, it needs to get into the political language today.
It has, but
it needs to go much more rigorous, because that's where the policies come in, right? We are. I mean, you ask a person to switch off their tap when they're brushing their teeth is one act, but I think the bigger acts is to happen through the policy levels. And I know, but there's always this other lobby which is about economic based, which talks about consumption of the resources of planet at a much larger level, the mining industries or deforestation, which is all happening parallelly, because human needs have moved, because our core philosophy of life on planet Earth is based on money, on economics, right? Your growth of a country is measured on GDP, which is economy, right? How is it possible for us to move from? I love the other idea of growth
Bhutan.
national happiness, Bhutan,
Uh,
right? How do you move to that zone and try and see that you're looking at happiness, but not just finance, and the finance in the few pockets of few people there.
right. Well, Chetan, in the process of making decision, so there must have been a lot of mistakes you made. I mean, all of us make mistakes. But do you think there are some things which you did were quite bad, but most importantly, what you learned out of them have shaped the way you make decisions going forward?
Very much, very much. I think when we were working on some large projects, we realized the amount of materials we consume. So I think post that idea of when we started consuming, when you go into any hotel today, you go into any restaurant or space today, you look at that simple one hall which serves you food, you will see at least another 150 materials which is being consumed in that one single room, right? So that definitely has put my thought and trying to see how I can minimize the use of material, but to give a much better experience for the user. At one level, you're looking at ideas of sustainability and other things. The other level, you're looking at dreams of a human being, of putting it coming alive. Right?
Mm.
How do you escalate the dream of a human being to another level? At the same time, you're looking at sustaining the resources within yourself. I don't think you need to spend too much of money to create a space which is beautiful. You give us beer bottles, we'll make something beautiful out of it. Right? So, is it possible for us to escalate a person's dream with the minimal use of materials?
Yeah, so most people tend to approach it as a binary, either yes or no, this way or that way. So there can always be both can be achieved. That's what you're.
Oh yes, oh yes. Very
Right.
true. I mean, that's the beauty of again India as a concept. India does not live on a binary, and that's
Right.
where we are standing right now, right? The world per se, you go to the Western world, you always have an yes or a no. You always have a rule in place, whereas India is multi-layered. Um, that's the beauty in a many sense. I mean, the idea of you look at those pictures which we see where you have a ventilator and you have an AC unit and a fan fixed to it, with the two legs of a fan moving to two different rooms, and right, simple
Right.
things like that, which is jugaad, which makes this multi-layering of India into a much better, much interesting place.
Right. So
So
one more thing I wanted to ask you on that. We tend to get into loops in our actions. We tend to do something and we tend to repeat the same thing, though we think we are doing it differently this time. So, and most times, I think in my observation, most people do that, and we always try to get a different outcome, but we end up getting a similar outcome because we are essentially doing the same thing, and we are thinking we are doing it differently. So, have you found yourself caught in that kind of a loop?
very much, very much, very
So,
much. No, I think a lot because today one of the biggest parameter in India, especially for a residential project, is this idea of vastu, which pushed you into a loop of prefixing. Even if a client comes to us and says vastu is not a criteria for us, you end up going back into that loop and start working with that loop mindset. Um,
there's somebody in their family will influence them to say that this won't
I
work.
don't know. I mean, it could be my own influence. It could be, even though if you really ask me, am I a believer of it? I'm not a believer of it, but I definitely respect somebody else's belief in it, because belief is something which I can't question. Right? It's somebody's personal, reasons for it. So I can't question somebody's belief. I can't question somebody's belief on an idea or a concept or an idea of God or whatever. So I can't. As an architect, I have to just respect that. But that might be a loop I get stuck on many a time. And
How do you
yeah,
break out of that?
breaking out of that is kind of, it needs to be conscious. It needs to be conscious. It needs to be conscious as an effort where it becomes a part of your requirement list, which when you sketch out your first line of thought, right? You kind of make it as a set of requirements, and this is
No,
not.
but complacency sets in, right? With over a period of time, you've done it so many times. You think, oh, I can handle that. So you don't even being conscious of some of these things. Sometimes complacency makes it difficult. So how do you get yourself to stop and
So
change?
sometimes we question in a certain set of projects whether you want to shift from that line of thought. Because for a firm to run, you need processes to be put in place.
Yeah,
Right?
some standardization of things.
Yes. So that's where you push that into that standard process for us to address, even in a design process. But sometimes you move beyond that and say, okay, the line of thought here is not that standard process, but the line of thought is a different thing. Say, for
Oh,
example, like
so what is that aspect which says that this is not, we should not go with the standard process, we need to approach it differently? What is it that makes that bit saying that don't have
it,
to approach,
okay, it could be the project type, it could be the project concept, the philosophy behind that,
which is
what you want to
basically
achieve.
from outside as a customer has to bring in that, or
No, no,
where
no. Sometimes you start working on it. Say, for example, what we are doing with the science center in Gauri, right? A science center is a very futuristic thing. So your initial idea was you look at very futuristic materials, screens all over the place. That's science. Right? You talk about the very backdrop of your where you're sitting is about movement, is about dynamism. But to shift from there and say, can I root it down to India and say, can I work with Ramdarth? Is a conscious shift, is a conscious breakdown of that image and to push into something else. Like I
so
was telling you,
how do you stitch them together then? How do you justify that exercise or action?
uh, first is to break the mindset you associate with that material and or I mean with that expression and the build form you're creating. To break the mindset that science is only about dynamism, right? It need not be about dynamism. Or to say that rammed earth is not dynamic. You break that. Can I
Yeah,
make rammed earth dynamic?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right?
I
I
mean,
can make rammed earth dynamic
well,
as an
it essentially is, right? I mean, every particle has every atom. I mean, so
no, but
there's
how do you
at
express
the
it as a
core
very
of it,
dynamic?
material inside and here are same. So we call it, this is non-living thing, this is living thing. But yeah, at a core level, but from a point of uh, uh, argument as a science and futuristic and this, how do you justify that? How do you stitch them together?
I think that's part of the creative process you work with. Right? I think that's part of the creative process of a series of iterations which happen in any design process. Um, because when you go into an iterative process and not get stuck with what you've sketched out or thought of at the first time, and you start questioning the very reasons for it, and you go
Mm.
into a sequential iteration of what can change, Like I was sharing with you about my core philosophy, which is about
Mm.
understanding my own boundaries and then consciously stepping out. Is it possible for me to do the same with a material, with a thought process of constantly moving out of my comfort zone to push that into another uncomfortable zone and thereby creating a new expression? Right? I think that's one way of really addressing complacency and moving to another realm, which is very new to you. So, for example, you look at rammed earth and you will not say it's a very dynamic thing. It can't be a dynamic thing. It's a very rigid, grounded element. But you change the geometries of it, you change the articulation of the rammed earth, you can make it very dynamic. You can make it very futuristic. Mhm. It can become a very, very interesting language for us to play with.
Yeah, I think the very approach itself gets some sense of curiosity. Say, okay, this is interesting. Let's see how this evolves. Yeah. Uh, Chetan, now uh, from a industry point of view, which direction is it going overall? How do you see uh, the the whole industry is going in India, and how do you uh, rank it from a point of you've actually grown up with this, and you have traversed into biomimicry and all that. So, how is the whole Indian architecture as a sector moving, and how do you see globally things are changing, and how do you see things are see today? There was a time where India used to be following some countries, right? And today the time gap has come down, and in many areas India is ahead as well. So in this journey, how do you see your sector, if you can put architecture as a sector, or how do you want to put it? I mean, I'm just struggling. So if it is construction, you can put it as an industry, but how do you put architecture in that context, and how do you see this evolving now?
I remember one of my friends talking about India being a very nascent democracy. We were talking about corruption in India. We were talking about why is the political system so corrupt. And one of the ideas was that India is quite nascent, is quite an young child in a democratic setup when you look at the other Western worlds. Similarly, architecture per se, in India, architecture, and it had gone to a zenith. It had gone to a zenith where we were creating one of the world's best architectural expressions. You look at the temple architecture, you look at the sculptures of that time. You're talking about climate, where the sun could move in through a small opening and
Right.
create some marvelous pieces of expression in the past. So we've definitely gone down, partially because of colonization and a lot of those influences, which has shifted our thought process. So as a democratic country, as an independent country, India still not yet opened up its eyes to the world scenario right now. We're still trying to build as much as possible. We were discussing about this, where Bangalore as a city is quite cancerous, right? We are absurdly building places all over the world, right? But you see post COVID, you see a small birth of another industry called farmland developments, right?
You're right.
People are
Right.
now able to work at their homes. So can I go out of the city and stay in a farm, grow my food, go on a horse ride, and still work from that place? That's also happening, right? Similarly, in terms of materiality, in terms of expressions, there are people who are working on lead, there are people who are working on griha, which are all standards being put up for sustainability as a measure. And you're talking about green rated buildings happening in various sectors. So people are also parallelly getting conscious about the environment. So I think it's a mixed growth right now. I would still look at the 80-20% rule and say 20% of the country is moving towards sustainability or something like that, and 80% is absurdly building land banks or new structures. That needs to change. We need to shift to that 20-80%, which might take some more time. And it's the same case, I would say, in a lot of southeastern countries, where this idea of growing bigger, growing larger, or even in the Middle Eastern countries, where they want to build a lot more, is very critical. But in the very near future, I think we'll break that glass barrier, and then we'll start looking at sustainability as a very critical element, and it becomes a norm that all buildings need to look at the cyclical system of its growth, and not just the one-time act of building something and then throwing it into a landfill.
So, basically, today while you work on your designs, you also do a lot of workshops, trying to educate a lot of people on a whole lot of these concepts, particularly
Yeah.
biomimicry is what that excites you more,
Yeah.
and also perhaps sustainability from that aspect. But professionally speaking, I mean, from a point of being realistic, how feasible if you have to build a house anywhere in India and sustainably from a point of your earlier you defined in an earlier part of the conversation. Simply put, the shortest time from where something is sourced to where it is utilized from a point of building. I
Right.
mean, sourcing the building materials at the nearest point. So I'm not talking about something building in next to a cement factory, right? In a city, let's say Bangalore itself, or maybe Hampi itself. So how realistically possible is it from a point of one building really sustainable house or a building in an urban setup like Bangalore or a rural setup like Hampi today?
Building a sustainable structure today is not a big challenge.
Not a challenge?
Absolutely challenge. You have
Even in a urban place like Bangalore?
even in an urban setup, right? I'll tell you. Say, for example, but then you need to change your definition of materials you're using.
Right, exactly. That's where I was coming from, right? That is the.
So, what's the material which is available for you at large in a city?
Unquestionably waste.
It could be waste. It could be waste, and I think that's going to be a huge building material in the near future. One of the biggest industries in a city, income generating industry in a city, is waste management.
It is, though the reality for the waste management companies is quite different because I'm kind of familiar. I've been associated with waste impact for quite some time now. So, though as much of an opportunity it appears to be or seems to be, there's still a lot of challenges in doing that.
Right, right. No, but I'll tell you. I mean, we've put across a design concept using tires as a building material for a home.
Okay.
Because the tire, I mean, for me, the tire is a very, very interesting geometry. I can fill half of it with debris concrete. I use old pieces of material from the market and pack it up, and use the other half to put earth and grow something. So the facade of the building can become just a wall of green.
Okay, what would be how healthy would that be to live, sleep, breathe? Because they come with a lot of different chemicals, different. It's a lot of different materials put together, right? They also have a lot of chemicals in use. So what happens to their interaction, and what
until
happens to
until and unless they're exposed to the kind of heat from where it can push things out. I mean, it's definitely not as poisonous as your existing buildings are.
Okay, are you referring to the lead paint and such?
Yeah,
But
you're looking at paint which is lead based, You're
But
looking at
I
concrete.
think those things are already addressed, right? I mean, I think it's been a few years now that lead-based paints have been out of the market.
There are coming out, but there are coming out. In fact, going back to biomimicry, there is a study on the shark skin and how the shark skin is bacteria free, and they're coming out with paints which are based on the shark skin's composition, which are used in clean rooms in hospitals, where you
Mhm.
don't have to have anything which are 1,000 microns big. So you have 1,000 micron clean room, which is evolved from paints evolved from a shark skin. So evolution like that is happening. So, but I'm saying, if I'm looking at material which is available locally, you can design with locally available materials like debris and make structures out of it. You go back. I mean, you go back.
How would you compare it to the cost point? I mean, it costs what on average, if it is X rupees, or let's say, is it a 2,000 or 2,500 is the average construction per square feet?
Approximately,
So
yes.
in that context, how cheaper or expensive would this be? Or can it be compared at all?
No, I don't think it should be compared. Because I'll tell you, I mean,
See,
I,
you also
I,
mentioned, if you remember,
I
current
might,
world is economics, right?
correct.
So we
I
still
might,
have to balance it.
I might get a tire which is debris best, uh, for a fraction of cost of what I get a brick out of for, right? But the labor for doing the same might be much more expensive.
Correct. So in that context, overall, how do you see it? Because end of the day, somewhere we have to balance, because most decisions are still pretty much economy driven, right? It can't be, if it is a fad, just a thing, only few will do it. It cannot be, see, something sustainable has to be something as commonly possible to implement so that more people will adopt.
Right. Okay, if I'm really looking at that way, I mean, I would say, if you're willing to work with debris as a building material, I can half your cost of construction.
Doable.
Yes. We finished a home in Mysore 3 years ago, a 3 bedroom house, which costed at around 12 lakhs, because everything out there was a debris as a building material. We
And what
demolished
would you put the life to be for the building?
25, 30 years.
Pretty much the same.
Yes. Today, a life of a building is not more than 30 years.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Right? We're
Okay.
building a cottage in Kunnur, Uti, where it's again completely evolved from the ideas of geometries in nature and how that works. But we've designed it using materials which can be reused after its 25 years of usage into something else down the line. So I'm trying to see whether a material can outlive the building, but as a material for something else.
Like any body, any human, any animal, plant,
Any
trees. Yeah.
Yes.
So
Correct.
that's essentially the core philosophy of biomimicry.
Correct. Design is all about creative life, which is conducive for life again.
Hmm. So, well, beautiful line. And thank you, Chetan. This is amazing conversation. I just love to continue on and on. Uh, thank you once again. Thank you so much. And for the audience and listeners, I hope you enjoy this conversation and come back soon. We're going to get Chetan to talk about his perspective on future, and hopefully we'll get some predictions also out of him. And for the those of you who have missed the first part, I'm sure you will go back and listen to it after you heard this. And lastly, if you have not yet subscribed to Future Fast, do it now and do share it with all your friends in it. Thank you once again and enjoy the ride. Chetan, once again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Nandana. It was great interacting with you. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.